welcome to the Tea and a Butty podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
Today's episode, we're going to be talking about British comedy and what it means to you.
As requested by, I think, an Instagram follower.
It was an Instagram follower, I think, yeah. I think we're just going to talk about the different types.
I can't believe we haven't done this topic yet.
Yeah, we've done British sitcoms. I think we've talked about my favourite. I mean, and if we haven't, then I'll give you a rundown of my favourite ones, you know. But anyway, yeah, I mean, British comedy. You didn't know too much about it before you met me, or had you really...
Well, I mean, what are we talking about exactly when we say British comedy? Are we talking about
the best comedy in the world, of course?
Television, movies, stand-up, or just like British humor in general?
Well, all of those things, because I mean, it's all comedy, isn't it? It's all humour.
I mean,
this could be like British comedy / humour.
Yeah. I feel like we've talked about British humor before.
Yeah.
To some degree, because...
In relation to American humour.
Yeah.
You know.
Because you always hear over here that the British sense of humor or British comedy is dry. It's a dry
sarcastic
sense of humor. You know, but then when you started showing me all your British shows, one after the other, bombarding me with British humor, I didn't find it to be really dry at all. I think that was that's a total myth, that the British sense of humor is a dry sense of humor. Because dry humor to me is like you make a joke. Deadpan
delivery, yeah, which is a hallmark of British comedy.
Meaning you make a joke with a straight face.
Yeah, it's a hallmark of British humour, that.
I find majority of British humour to be very, like, slapstick and in-your-face, obvious kind of humor, though.
That's one way of... You're thinking of, like, Mr. Bean.
I'm thinking of all of it. Give me some... The main example of, like, deadpan humor that I can think of is George Harrison's sense of humor. George Harrison from the Beatles, for anybody who has no idea who I'm talking about when I say George Harrison.
Lead guitarist of the Beatles.
He's the main example. I can't... tell me a British show that's full of deadpan humor.
Well, I'm thinking of, like, Blackadder. It's got a fair amount of it.
I find Blackadder very silly.
Silly as in, like, what? Because of the situation?
Maybe it's
what
more
about
of a
Peep
situation.
Show?
I mean...
Peep Show? Yeah.
I find it's really silly, too.
I mean, but I mean, just the way...
Not silly in, like, stupid. Like, oh, it's just a stupid show, you know?
Stupid!
But just silly as in, like, I get it. You know, a Peep Show might not be really fair because that's one of the most recent shows we've watched, and I'm very familiar with British humor now.
Yes, which is why you might find it silly now, because...
But Blackadder is one of the first things you showed me, and I couldn't get into it because, to me, it was so, like, I don't know, just slapstick and obvious and silly.
I mean, yeah... I'm trying to think of a situation now, but yeah, maybe some of the themes,
The ones in the graves, kind of silly. You know, it's dark. It's
a dark
humor
comedy,
sometimes. To me,
Father Ted.
Father Ted is silly again.
Only Fools and Horses.
I really think
maybe that's another one.
I don't find Only Fools and Horses quite as silly. I find that to be very similar to American sitcoms, except for the language.
Yeah.
The style of show that Only Fools and Horses is, I think that's like straight up just like American sitcoms.
And guess what? They've tried to remake it several times over here, but just couldn't. And I mean, if you think about it, Steptoe and Son, which I've never shown you, was remade as Sanford and Son. Till Death Do Us Part was the Love Thy Neighbor. Was it with Archie Bunker? What's that one called?
No, All in the Family.
All in the Family, that's it. That was you know, a lot of British sitcoms have been remade over here into something that, you know, Americans would be familiar with, you know. Because, you know, it's like, oh, well, we don't understand the cultural references,
right.
so, you know.
There you go. Only Fools and Horses is a show that if I didn't know you...
You would never have seen.
I would not have found that funny.
Yeah.
Because there's so much slang, there's so many cultural references, and I think that is the main difference between British and American humor. Like, Britain gets American humor because you guys get so many American TV shows and films. And
to be fair there, American humor is very kind of light on the cultural references.
I guess so. I wonder if that's done on purpose because we know we're going to be exporting it everywhere.
Maybe.
Huh.
Maybe, but no. I mean, sometimes you have to,
you have a show like Gilmore Girls.
Like Friends.
Gilmore Girls sticks in my head full of cultural references.
But again, we get a lot of culture in the UK, you know. We get a lot of American culture anyway. Yeah. You know, whereas it's maybe because, you know, like the majority of Americans are just concentrating on their own culture and their own daily life, and so they don't like, they only get like, oh, they may know the Queen, or maybe they know Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister, and, you know, but
I'm gonna venture to guess that the majority of Americans, if you said who is Boris Johnson, they would have absolutely no idea.
Who is Boris Johnson?
I'm embarrassed to say that, but
it's like it's not really embarrassing because, I mean, I couldn't tell you the Prime Minister of India, you know.
I guess, yeah.
I mean, it's like over, you know, America just exports so much of its stuff and doesn't really import too much from, you know, I mean...
Well, unless you watch PBS.
Yeah.
If you watch
or BBC America,
you watch PBS or... Yeah, but BBC America's full of American stuff as well.
Yeah.
If you watch PBS and you have religiously forever, then you probably can get British humor.
You can get British humor, yeah. I mean, most of it is, I mean, yeah.
But I really think, to go back to Only Fools and Horses, I think that's the best example you could possibly have brought up. And it's nothing to do with the fact that the humor's dry or that it's sarcastic or anything like that. It's purely the language. Like, I don't know what before knowing you, I don't know what kushti is. I don't know what, Plonker. I don't know. You know, I mean, you can figure out some of that
Del
stuff,
Boy's terrible French, you know.
Yeah, I guess so. Just the accents in general are super thick.
It's the London slang.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing is, that show did a lot to influence it. I mean, Kushti and, you know, Lovely Jubbly and all that kind of stuff, you know, the stuff that this character and the central character in the show, Derek Trotter, says. It's all very like East South London slang, you know, Peckham, where the show is based.
Yeah.
And, you know, because of the popularity of Only Fools and Horses, that started to be used by Londoners. You know, it was a case of life imitating art, you know? Because I don't know if it had been, you know, I mean, someone might disagree and said, oh, yeah, they've been saying Kushti and Lovely Jubbly and all that for years. Mm-hmm. In the 60s and stuff like that, you know? Because, I mean, Only Fools and Horses came out in the 80s and it stopped in the early 2000s. But it's one of Britain's most beloved sitcoms, you know? But I mean, I don't think it was ever really shown over here because it was literally it was so regional.
So specific.
Think
about
because Fawlty Towers, it was like, it was a crazy hotel manager.
Yeah. You know, kind of.
And it's like, you can kind of get what's going on here. Because I remember I gave a series 1 to your boss, didn't I? Your old boss.
Of what?
Of Only Fools and Horses.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't. He only got through one episode before he said, I have no idea
what they're talking
about.
The theme song is running through my head.
Yeah.
Stick a pony in your pocket. What's a pony? You know.
That means 25
I'll fetch the
pounds.
suitcase from the van. it's like, okay, we know what van means, but it's not the same thing to us as it is to Britain or what they're.
If you want the best ones, then you don't ask questions, then brother, I'm your man.
Yeah, but then just the concept of he's a
wheeler dealer.
He's a wheeler dealer.
You know,
what is that? You know, he buys and sells.
He buys and sells, but he buys like knockoff goods and sells them down a market.
Yeah, but we don't have markets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, we have flea markets, but
he's got a brother who's slightly dim-witted, and you know, I mean, the family element was what made it so popular in the UK. It was like, oh yeah, this is like a family, you know.
I just think there's so many foreign concepts in a lot of British television shows, particularly, that we just do not get them because they don't exist over here, you know what I mean? And so therefore that's why we have a hard time of finding them funny, you know what I mean? I absolutely hate, and I really, really resent British people, though, who think they invented sarcasm. Oh, well, you don't get our humor because it's sarcastic humor. We're sarcastic. Do you think sarcasm doesn't exist in America? Do you think we don't do sarcasm?
It's employed differently.
I don't know.
It's kind of employed differently because basically what...
All right, yeah, you tell us.
I mean, the Wikipedia, right, kind of gets it in the first line. British humour carries a strong element of satire aimed at the absurdity of everyday life.
Yeah.
That's kind of like not a thing over here.
No, I would say the only show we've ever had that exemplifies that line right there is Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
that may have been... Yeah, that may have been because, oh yeah, you know, like they looked at the British way of life or something like that, and they decided, well, you know, there's been so many remakes of American sitcoms, let's write an original one that's kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's a show about nothing, as they say, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's a show about absurdity of everyday life, you know, it's some guy trying to get a date and, you know...
Just characters that you meet in life.
Yes, characters that you meet in life, which is the same thing, you know, like Peep Show is about that too.
That only exists in like one episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very British, really.
It's like, oh, this character, you know, and we met him and, you know, whatever, you know, it'd just be kind of like, oh, this is a character.
Yeah.
And it's kind of
like... But
it's
funny because it's like someone you've met at some point somewhere.
Well, it's like,
too,
you know, it's like you go down the pub in Britain, you know, like we did.
Right.
And thing, and you know, there's a couple of characters. There's characters there.
There's so many characters.
Yes, and it's like people don't have to write. All they have to go into a dictaphone. It's like, oh, I met Bob the Builder or whatever down the pub last night, and the Smelly Man. These are actual people who go to a pub that my dad used to frequent. And it's like, well, they used to anyway, they don't anymore. But, you know, it's that kind of like, they're just characters and it's just like, okay, just write them into a show. Mm-hmm. And that's it, you know, away you go. Whereas, I don't know, it's a kind of different dynamic over here. People, you kind of have to work harder, I bet, to kind of like think up. Because I'm trying to think, Friends, it was a group of 20-somethings.
Yeah.
In New York, you know, living life, but it was kind of like, they had that kind of like, you know, like in the very early episodes, they had that kind of like character driven, like, oh, Paul the wine guy.
Yeah,
and all
sometimes.
Them types. It was like, oh, yes, yeah, da, 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 da. You know, and they would make fun of him.
But it became more typical American where it was about relationships. Yeah.
And I mean, of course, there's an element of that in British comedy. But, you know, it's kind of like, it's making fun of the ineptitude of one or the other person, or the both of them in that relationship. Mm-hmm. You know, Peep Show kind of did that, you know, where he was all into Sophie, played by Olivia Colman. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he just couldn't get it together. And he was living in a flat with this guy who didn't work and, you know, was always giving him advice, but it was terrible. And, you know... And it was it's cringe comedy. Cringe comedy is very popular in Britain. Alan Partridge, The Office. You know, it's like that kind of comedy. It's like, oh yeah, this is what we need. We need embarrassment. We
Yeah.
need severe secondhand embarrassment to just be like, oh, Peep Show, The Office, I'm Alan Partridge. It's just absurd situations
Yeah.
about social ineptitude and just like, oh,
Yeah.
Whereas over here, it's like, oh, I do not want to feel like that. I want to laugh.
Yeah, I guess so.
I want this guy to come out with a punchline,
Yes, I think so, yeah. I think you're probably right there. We don't... I think political correctness has gone kind of mad in this country. And we don't want to make fun of people anymore. Watching old episodes of Seinfeld or even Friends. I mean, you're the one, I think, who's told me what a backlash Friends kind of has against it now.
The Joey character and stuff.
And watching old episodes of Seinfeld, I'm just like, oh my God, they would never
be able
make
to
an episode about this today.
It's that thing of they don't make them like that anymore, and they don't make them like they used to.
Yeah. But in Britain, political correctness isn't... I mean, it is a big thing in life in general, but not so much in shows still, huh? I mean,
no.
They still make fun of a lot of things in television and in...
They do, and of course they get brought up on it, but it's like, they come to that kind of thing. It's comedy. It's there to make fun of. We're not mocking it.
Yeah.
We're making fun of the people who do mock it.
Yeah.
And
it's like you have to be able to make fun of yourself, don't you?
Well, yes. That and that's one of the thing, on this the English First website, which is like a beginner's guide. Someone wrote an article, a beginner's guide to British humour. And the first
thing
is the first paragraph is laugh at yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say
Richard Ayoade, comedians to look out for is John Richardson, Richard Ayoade, Jack Whitehall, and Sarah Millican.
Yeah. I think Britain definitely does that better than America.
It's laughing at yourself. Mm-hmm. It's like taking the piss out of your own actions, because then that's funny, and it's like, and people are like, oh well, it's kind of like, self-deprecating humor.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, it's funny. It's quite funny. And I mean, we watching these like reality TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the comedian voiceover does. He takes the piss out of the people in the thing, but he also takes the piss out of himself.
Yeah.
It's just like no one's off limits.
Yeah.
No one gets out of this.
Equal opportunity offender.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. But over here, it's kind of like, oh no,
Can't say that. Yeah.
We've got to like look up to this girl, or we've got to look up to this guy. We can't make fun of them.
Or we have to be sensitive to how making fun of them will make them feel,
And it's like, I'm sure there's a lot of people like that in Britain who are like, oh, this is a terrible show. You're making fun of these people, and I don't agree with that, and da-da-da-da. But it's, it's like, yeah, but, we're making fun of ourselves too,
Yeah.
And you gotta laugh.
Yeah.
You've gotta laugh.
And it's like none of it is to be taken seriously. It's nothing. It's a show.
It's not like people taking things too seriously that end up not laughing or never laughing. They're just,
Let's talk a little bit about why British comedy shows that are remade in America that are quite successful in Britain. Yeah. But they remake them for an American market because, again, we don't get British cultural references.
Yeah, they have to, yeah.
So they remake it over here. It's almost the same show, though, but it does not work over here. What's that all about?
I think it's got something to do with the actual, like, subject matter. I mean, there's been several like people who've delved into the like, oh, why didn't this make it over here? And when it was so popular in, I mean, for a start, you see like, let's take for example The Office with Ricky Gervais and as David
that was
Brent.
Quite popular over here though.
The Office, the British one.
Well, both.
Yeah. And people think, oh well, it wasn't as successful because it ended after 2 series, but it's like, no, they ended it. They stopped making them on purpose. Mm-hmm. And it's like they remade it over here, and they kind of like, I think the first season was a complete rip off of the of the British
I think
version.
like word for word.
And that's where it kind of, word for word, and it was like, this is not going to last. But then, it lasted.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was absurdity in it.
Yeah.
I mean, there was cringe, but it wasn't as cringe as the British version. They kind of like, oh, this is funny. These guys are crazy.
Yeah.
And so
there were more crazy people.
There were more crazy people, so it was like, oh, it's a different show now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a completely different animal.
It's funny because that show, I've never seen like, what is it, Parks and Recreation.
Yeah.
And I think maybe 30 Rock were both similar type shows. I don't know if they, how similar, but I think that they were in the same sort of vein, and they were both quite popular also. Cringe type comedy and situations.
That's slowly becoming the thing over here, but it hasn't really taken off as much as it has in Britain.
One big example I can think of, though, that was a massive failure over here was the In-Betweeners remake. Was it called In-Betweeners over here?
It was called In-Betweeners, and I think they ripped it off word for word.
I don't understand how that didn't do better over here. Again, I never saw the remake,
it was absurd.
So maybe it was just
absurd teenage humor.
Maybe it was just terribly done. I don't know. Maybe that's...
I think it was terribly done.
But to me, that was a show that was so universal, just about the awkward teenage boy, basically.
Yeah.
And how, like, just perverted and disgusting they can be sometimes,
yes.
And it seems to me like that should have translated no problem over here.
That should have translated no problem over here, except the fact that, I think with US media and people like that, it's like, oh no, we're on TV, we've got to look cool.
Maybe.
There's got to be an element of cool in this. How can we put that in there? And they try, and it's like, no, there's not supposed to be any cool in there.
I mean, I can't speak to it
it's
directly
like it's supposed
because I
to
never...
be as raw and disgusting and stupid.
And awkward and just
awkward.
Like, oh,
I mean,
God.
With American Pie, they even tried to, like, do that. They tried to put an element of cool in there, even though it was stupid humor and everything like that.
Well, they definitely, I don't know if they did the element of cool, but they did the romantic comedy bit.
Romantic comedy bit,
they had
yes.
to have the
relationships.
Yeah, again, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, I never saw the remake of The In-Betweeners, but I definitely saw people talking about what a terrible show it was, and it's such a shame because the British one, I mean, you could say it's a terrible show, but terrible for other reasons rather
it's
than
terrible
the show
for
itself.
It's got a lot of cringe comedy in there, and it really pushed the envelope in that kind of like way. It pushed the boundaries of what it did, and it's like, and it's something relatable to a lot of teens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially to me. I mean, The In-Betweeners was very relatable to me because it was like me and my friends.
Yeah.
So, maybe over here there's still that kind of like thing of like, oh, I'm cooler in my head,
Yeah.
than I am actually. And I don't want to see that on screen. I want to see me looking cool on screen.
Yeah.
Whereas in Britain, it's like, no, this is exactly how you were in school and don't even lie. And it's like, yeah, it was,
Yeah. There's other elements, or I don't know if elements is the right word, but there's other aspects of British comedy that just do not come over here. Like, I don't know, sometimes the stand-up can be quite similar, but then you guys have like pantomime at Christmas.
Pantomime, yeah.
And you guys just think that's so funny and you get into it.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we think it's so funny, but it's just kind of like a tradition. The thing is with Britain, it's like these things have been traditional for years. And it's like, there's people that complain about them, but they still go to them, It's like, I haven't been to pantomime in years. I mean, since I was a kid. I think that I went to one at like the Barbican Theatre or something when I was a kid. And, what they are is they're kind of like a jokey retelling of Cinderella or Jack and the Beanstalk, these fairy tales. Mm-hmm. With like, and there's like
the man will be dressed as the female character.
Yeah, there's usually a character called Widow Twankey. I think that's in Cinderella, though. And I'm not, and it's like, there's like tropes like the pantomime villain, you know, who's like, oh, he's behind you. Oh, no, he isn't, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, he is, you know.
So is that funny and entertaining just because it's
kids.
tradition?
It's kind of traditional for kids. I guess it started up in like the Georgian era or something, you know.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. It seems very like something.
And it's
like that.
and it's still, and you know, it's now become like a refuge for like has-been celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
so kind of like the Nutcracker, like a mother. What's her name with all the kids under her skirt, you know?
Yeah.
Well, in Austin anyway. I don't know if that's something that happens in productions of the Nutcracker across the country, but in Austin they always put some minor celebrity, some has-been celebrity or whatever to play her.
Yeah.
You know?
Widow Twanky. Yeah, Widow Twanky's kind of the same thing.
Okay,
you know, they're seasonal pantomimes, and it's just like actors who were on like The Bill, you know, that was a police show in the like 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and it's like, oh, you know, I'd like, oh, he used to play Tony Stamp on The Bill, or you know, he used to be you know, on this show that was like popular years ago. It's like people who just didn't get a career beyond that show,
mm-hmm.
and they need money. So, you know, pantomime, you know, they're doing pantomime, and it's still acting in a way, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I think something like that would just not be taken seriously over here.
It's not, I mean, it's not supposed to be taken seriously.
No, I know that, but I mean...
It's like something that would never take off.
Yeah.
It's like a seaside thing as well.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's like a seaside thing. But I mean, you know, I mean, you can go wherever. It's Christmas time thing. It's like a Christmas tradition. Oh,
yeah, if you guys have seen Love Actually, the scene where, what's her name? The Prime Minister's girlfriend. He's going to find her.
Oh, that's a school play.
That's a school play, but that's sort of the same thing, isn't it? They're all wearing like weird costumes, and
it's a nativity.
Like... Oh well, yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
No, that
okay, never mind. That's something different.
Yeah, it's something different. It's a nativity. Yeah,
it's a different tradition.
Nativity is another tradition. I mean, when I was a kid, I was always in the nativity in school. I was usually playing the shepherd, or you know, one time I think I played Joseph.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the as far as I got as leading role.
Strike it, reverse.
Yeah.
But maybe people in America take themselves too seriously for that to be a thing over here.
That there is an element of like not letting yourself look like stupid or something, you know, not, you know, thinking
not being able to laugh at yourself.
Not being able to laugh at yourself.
That's it.
I mean, I'm not
maybe
obviously
we've cracked it. We've cracked it. We've cracked the reason.
The code.
Yeah, we've cracked the reason British humor is different than American humor, because Brits are able to laugh at themselves and Americans aren't.
Yes, and it's like that's one of the things. It's like, oh, making fun of. I'm making fun of you, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's funny because, you know, it's like, oh, when, you know, someone does that maybe to me, or someone does that to a Brit, they usually go, you know, yeah, but it's not very funny, is it? I mean, I think I could do it better, you know, making fun of myself, you know?
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's like, oh, I'm making fun of you, ha ha ha, you know, I'm teasing you, you know?
Just teasing, yeah, that's what we would say.
Yeah, I'm just teasing, and it's like, you know, it's like, I think I got the handle on teasing myself, actually, you know, it's like, but it's like, if someone's like, oh, I'm making fun of you, you know, it's like, oh, what? You're being very rude.
In America,
you
mean?
You're being very offensive here, you know. It's like, oh, you're saying that was a bit rude.
That was rude, yeah.
And it's like, no, we're just joking, you know. It's like, we don't actually think you're ugly
because
or whatever,
I mean,
you know?
Because like... I mean, in Britain, there's a thing where, like, guys will call each other the C word, like, just completely not...
There's a lot of swearing in Britain.
They're not angry at each other, though, at all. Just like, oh, how you doing, you old C
slag.
Word.
Yeah, you old C word, yeah. And, you know, you old slag, you know.
Yeah.
Which is a derogatory term for a woman, but they'll say that to a man, and, you know.
And both of them will start cracking up,
like,
you know.
I'm all right, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm all right, you old Yeah.
It's
like, what are you up to, you old bloody...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
That's just the thing that...
it's banter, innit? It's banter.
Yeah.
It's banter.
It's like, insulting each other. I have
this is great banter.
I have to
it's
admit,
what we have is banter, you see?
We have banter, but I think
I'm not calling you a C word or anything,
Oh, you better not, anyway. No,
You call me a C word sometimes, but I'm all right with that,
I'll admit, as an American, I definitely don't... I still, even though you and I have been married for 10 years, still do not necessarily get the insulting humor.
No, you've told me a few times.
I don't find it funny.
I don't find it funny. I don't get
rude. How it's funny.
I don't get how winding someone up like that is funny.
Yeah.
It's not
like,
funny.
Why do you need to do that?
It's just something it's inherent and it's funny to me. It's like, well, it's not funny to me. And it's like, well, it should be. And then you say, shut up, you...
Shut up, you old slag.
Shut up, you old slag.
I mean, very occasionally I'll do it, and I guess, we're watching... We're binging still, if you guys heard a couple podcasts ago.
British reality TV, we're still on this train, everybody.
We're still binging Celebs Go Dating. And that's something very important to these people when they go on these dates. Like, oh, he didn't have any bants. He didn't have any banter, did he?
It's a back and forth. Banter is basically back and forth conversation where it's like jokey conversation. And
jokey I can get on board with.
It's just
but
like
sometimes,
jokes and people keep laughing. It's like, oh yeah.
Sometimes to me it can just be over the top and just like rude. And I'm just like, that was not necessary. Like, why is that funny? Why do...
I mean, yeah, because sometimes it goes a bit too over the top, and it's like, okay, dial down the banter now, it's like, oh, that was a bit too near the knuckle. But it's like, sometimes you just gotta go with the flow,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. Really quickly before, because we're basically out of time, but you promised them that you were gonna do your top TV shows, your top British comedies, which we probably did. I think we did do a British comedies episode like way in the beginning of this podcast. So if you guys want to hear, you'll have to go like way back.
Way back into the archives.
Yeah, it was like probably in our first 20 podcasts or so, somewhere in there.
I'd say like my top 5 are like Only Fools and Horses, Blackadder, One Foot in the Grave, the IT Crowd, and maybe Goodnight Sweetheart, for just like a gentle kind of sitcom. Just because of the way Gary Sparrow is, he's kind of like on my level, like, there you go. It's just, like someone's talking and he just makes a cultural reference like, oh yeah, so-and-so.
I love Goodnight Sweetheart, but I don't consider it like
his observations
a comedy necessarily. I mean it is.
His observations are sarcastic and, like, oh, and they hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
For me.
I think because of the story in that show, I don't know, I don't consider it like a comedy.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I would...
It's a good story,
Yeah, it's
a good show. So.
Only Fools and Horses is just...
Only Fools and Horses,
One Foot in the Grave is great. Peep Show is pretty funny.
Peep Show, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I had to kind of cajole you into watching that.
I just don't like the
point of view camera.
I just couldn't. I was like, stop. I don't want to look like he's looking at me and it's weird. Like,
it was a Channel 4 show.
It took a while for me to get into that, like, point of view. Yeah, it was just...
I like it. I like, Friday night dinner.
Yeah.
Friday night dinner. I'm just kind of like slurring my words here. I've just had tea. Yeah, that one. Peep Show, Friday night dinner, The In-Betweeners. There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot I can think. Recently was looking at The Detectorists. It's not really a sitcom. Yeah. It's more like it's like a time capsule of English life.
Yeah.
That's really gentle and it's just really beautifully done.
It's really gentle.
It's good. So The Detectorists, and it's funny that guy who plays Toby on This Is Us, they asked him on Watch What Happens Live.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what shows are you watching now? What shows? He goes, oh, it's this British show called, you probably would never have heard of it, called The Detectorists.
Yeah, and he's
like,
like, it's a great show.
It's a great show. And you know, Andy Cohen's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's like, honestly, if you're into like British comedy and like, it really hits a nail on the head. It's really good, so watch it, you know.
Yeah.
If you get it, you get it. You know, it's for you.
Yeah. And if you look up Only Fools and Horses and watch it and have absolutely no idea what is going on, just hit us up and we'll
explain things.
We'll try to anyway.
We'll try to anyway.
Anyway,
yeah.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your support, and we will talk to you next time.
Goodbye from me.
And bye from me.
From her.
From her.